Hey, hi, hello. My name is Fox Arie, and welcome to Fox Thoughts. In this episode, I'm gonna be talking about my thoughts on the Boondocks anime because I just recently finished watching it, and whoo, it was quite a wild ride. But before I dig into that a little more, I want to quickly issue a trigger warning on this episode because if you're at all familiar with the Boondocks, you would know the type of source material that this is quite strong. So if that matters to you, just look at the description and see if anything there may be a bit bothersome for you. Of course, view at your own discretion, all that good jazz. Otherwise, let's get the show on the road, baby. So, what is the Boondocks? It's a manga turned into an animated series, which we'll be talking about exclusively that because I have not read the manga at all, about this black family um, which consists of a granddad named Robert Freeman and his grandsons, Huey and Riley. The three of them find themselves in many, many, many stupendous and crazy just adventures. Whether it be, I don't know, ending up in the middle of a gang shootout or a popular rap artist moving in across from their house and causing a lot of trouble, just pretty much anything is on the table, and I really enjoy the crazy places this show goes to. It's quite impressive, and even though it is very, very unrealistic, there's always a sense of this could probably happen to an extent. Not all the time. There's some things where it's just like, oh, obviously that will most likely never happen in real life. But there's elements of it that I could see as kind of like not really an everyday occurrence, but more of, oh, this could happen, and I would also probably be pissed off too. Um, but it's not all perfect. Not and nothing is perfect. But for what it is, throughout the majority of its run, to give a basic overview of my feelings, I thought it was quite phenomenal and fun. um, However, I want to kind of dig into the more uh, kind of the things that I've learned from the Boondocks, but instead of like going like deep into every episode, because I didn't write any notes or anything. I'm not like, oh, I'm gonna talk about each episode individually. No, that's not how I want to talk about any type of series on Fox Dots. I just kind of want to go in and give my general thoughts. And the first thing that I really learned about this show, or I've not really learned, but come to realization, is racism. Of course, I've known that racism is real, and I've known my the majority of my life racism is real. Um, However, I've never really encountered blatant racism in my life, and the reason why it's important here is because it's a big factor of a lot of opposing forces or stereotypes or what have you in the Boondocks. Of course, it's mostly basically all played for laughs, and it's just for something for us all to laugh about and just take at somewhat face value as extremely absurd. I understand, but even though I am half Hispanic, which is, unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of people consider that perfectly fine to just make fun of for one reason or another in a non um, respectful way. Because there's a way to make fun of someone um, in a respectful way. I try to do that all the time, to be honest. And if I go too far, I apologize. That's just a general thing. That's a rule of thumb. However, again, I've never really experienced racism either blatantly around me. And honestly, I kind of forgot it existed. I think I'm just a little stupid, but watching through the Boondocks and seeing a lot of conflicts basically arise from racism helped me realize that, hey, this is a very real problem. And of course, extremely exaggerated. It is a cartoon after all, I get it. But it makes me become more aware of it being a problem. And I, of course, hate it because nobody should be mistreated for their identity or their race, ethnicity, nothing like that. You know, people should only be ridiculed if they did something bad and they don't want to fix it, right? That's just how I personally view the world. And it just sucks. Even in a comedy, I find myself like feeling bad for the Freemans or any other African American or black character that basically gets treated very poorly because of the world that they're in, which is somewhat similar to ours, especially back in the 2000s, where I believe this series mostly took place in, because it's very, oh, if you're black or African American or anything akin to that, then, oh, well, too bad, you're lesser than the average white man. And that's horrible, that's disgusting. But there are some times in the show where it's done in a way that is, I wouldn't necessarily say tasteful, but it is so ridiculous that I can't help but laugh at it. I feel very similar about South Park, where it could say or do the most horrendous and horrible things, but can't help but laugh and find it entertaining because it's so absurd. But that doesn't mean that if that happened in real life, I would laugh or point or, be all giddy, hee hee, all about it, because that's not cool. Racism not cool. Don't do it. If you do racism, get the fuck out of here. I don't want you here. Get out. Leave. Um, so that was a nice reminder and slap of reality, just like baked into the Boondocks' DNA. Another thing that I've really come to learn and understand way better is the black community and how, and their, not how, but more of their culture, and just kind of understanding their struggles. Again, is exaggerated. I understand that, and I know this is not one to one to the average black and or African American individual's life at all, of course, but it's good to understand more. I have had black and or African American friends throughout my life, but I never really asked about their culture because I never really knew where to begin. I mean, even in my own life, I don't really understand my own culture, out of my Peruvian and or Albanian sides of my heritage. So it's not like I was trying to ignore that it exists. It's more that I never really had a good way to kind of really ask about it or understand it or anything. However, I think, well, I wouldn't say the Boondocks is the best place to start, but it is a way for you to kind of absorb it in and be like, oh, okay, I guess I understand it a little bit better now. Of course, we're taking a big grain of salt because this is quite the crazy adventure, as to say the least. But I feel very much informed, and if any of you in the audience, if you're black and or African American and you want to tell me more about your culture, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'm not just saying this to farm engagement, all right? I am not gonna stoop low for engagement farming. I'm just genuinely curious. And also that just goes for anybody at all, no matter your ethnicity, race, or anything else. If you want to tell me more about your culture, I'm actually very interested to learn, because the only real culture I completely understand is American or the United States culture, because that's just what I've come to know and that's what I grew up with. That's what I'm the most comfortable and most understanding of. Anything else outside of the United States, I basically have no idea. Like, even within the United States, I have no idea. So, I would love to learn more if you would love to share with me. But, moving beyond that, I just think the show is, throughout the majority of its run, like I've stated a bit ago, pretty good. Um, One thing that took me by surprise was the action. I wasn't expecting the show to have a lot of action, or like not a lot of crazy like set pieces, and it doesn't do it like all the time. However, there are many moments in the Boondocks where the animation and action is heavily focused on, and it's all really good. It's really great, and it's a nice pace breaker from the crazy insanity of the comedy and the world that we're in. It just to take a moment to just have either characters we know already like fight each other, or these brand new characters that popped out of nowhere starting to fight our main cast. Whatever the action is about, most of the time it's really good, and I that's not even something I even expected out of the show. But It's something that has really stuck out to me, and it's something that I really appreciate because I kind of went into the show going like, I'm sure the animation will be fine, maybe a little stiff to cut costs. That's just how it is. That's just business. I totally understand that. But to see that the animators and storyboarders and anyone else who was working on the show like put their all into the fighting scenes really makes me greatly appreciate it. And I could totally see myself just watching a compilation of the best fight scenes of the show, just like every once in a while, because that's how much I really enjoyed it. It's just very fun to watch and very fluid and just something I love a lot. Um, when it comes to action scenes and any like prod or any creative endeavor, media, what have you, if it's not well done, I really, really just try to stray away from it. However, if it's well done, it's something I think about very often. And ever since finishing the Boondocks a few days ago, the thing that pops out to me most is the fighting scene. So I just want to really extremely praise it because it's great and it's wonderful. And if you have not seen the Boondocks anime at all, I recommend just like looking up some of its fighting scenes because they're really good. And maybe, just maybe, if you're not afraid or if you're not too sensitive to its strong material, then please check it out. It is quite the wild ride. That aside, I mostly enjoy the relationship between our main characters. They're very crazy. Like for example, the grandfather Robert is very, how do I want to say it? He's la, 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 la. um he's very much old man. He's very grumpy often, or he doesn't listen to what other people say. Um, and he's very much of a trickster and a liar, but he does it in a very charming way that I enjoy it. There are ways that characters throughout all different types of media can be written as kind of an asshole character and can be done really, really wrong. But then there's other times where it can be done really, really right, and it's very fun, and you just love to see them do whatever bullshit that they do. And more often than not, I would say even most of the time, Robert's bullshittery is very fun to watch. Now, for Riley, he is also very much like an asshole character to the other two leads, and just pretty much anyone else around him for the most part. And it is fun, it is funny, and it is engaging most of the time. There are some other times where it just kind of feels a bit much. I don't know if that's just me, but I just feel like his escapades are not really too grandiose, is the word, but it just kind of feels like it's just like more of the same. And that's not inherently a bad thing. It's just it gets a little old near the end. It gets a little stale where it's like, oh, all right, Riley's doing some crazy gang shit again. There are times where his crazy gang shit is really funny and really great. There's other times where it kind of feels like it's just treading the same material again. And I get it, that's inevitable, especially in a series where characters barely grow and develop, like the Boondocks. But still, I feel like there is still a lot of potential for his character to go other places if the show were to continue, hypothetically. It's just that I feel like the writers wanted to do more with Riley. They just never really figured out how they wanted to, but that's okay. I think overall, still a solid character. Not one of my favorites, but if it's a Riley centered episode, I'm not gonna roll my eyes. I'll just be like, you know what, I'll see. And usually I have a great time either way. Now, Huey is my absolute favorite. He is not much of a trickster or an asshole like his brother or grandfather. He is definitely a smart, introverted, quiet, but very serious and very smart kid. Also, a domestic terrorist, or sorry, he is a retired domestic terrorist, you know, as all 10-year-olds should be, obviously. Huey is also most often the voice of reason, definitely thinks things a lot through, and also usually gives the occasional, this is what you should learn from this experience type speech or dialogue near the end. it's not like he just sits on the side and doesn't actively try to stop what things are happening. He always tells Robert and Riley, "Hey, don't do that. That's some stupid bullshit right there." And then Robert would be like, "Man, did you lose your mind?" And then Riley would just not care. Maybe call him the F slur, the N word, just because that's the kind of person he is. And despite that, I honestly relate a lot with Huey because I I'm not like a super ultra genius or anything at all. However, I felt like I was the voice of reason growing up, and I was very like aware of my surroundings, and I even though I didn't have a great grasp of the world around me, as most children, of course, don't, I understood, hey, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and my parents and or guardians never listened to me. So I felt like I related to Huey in that to that extent. Now, when it comes to domestic terrorism, I'm not so much. I'm not considered a domestic terrorist at all, and I don't really want to be. That's not like something I'm after. That's not like a little quirky project I'm working on. So not so much that part. But when it comes to being introverted and voice of reason and just trying to make sure people that I care about or I have to care about because that's just the people around me and trying to lead them to a good path, but they still don't listen, but keep trying over and over again. I extremely relate to that. And that's probably why Huey is my favorite. And whenever an episode centers around him, I'm like, yes, I want to see what the cool things he do. Most of the time, it just focuses on Robert or Riley, which makes sense. Everybody loves to watch troublemakers if they're done right. And, they're really fun, but, hey, whenever the show gives us the Huey bone, what? Whenever the show gives us a little bit of more Huey time, I'm always very happy about it. Even though sometimes it does get a little dicey, but that's just how it be. However, we also have a very strong supporting cast, which also comes to the form of my second favorite character, starting off with Tom. He's a neighbor who is also a lawyer, has a wife and a child with that wife. Very nice guy. Also has to deal with Robert's bullshit all the time. And he's just great. He's very, very fun, very lovely character. And I just can't help but enjoy seeing him trying to be so nice and just get dragged through the mud. It sucks, and like I feel bad for him more often than not, but I just can't help but find it ridiculous. I mean, he always has a choice to just leave the Freemans alone, just do his own thing with his family, but he just likes, I guess, being around them. He likes being a nice guy too much to leave. And you know what? I understand that. I get that feeling. I just can't help but feel bad for him, but that's just how some people are. Now, of course, we can't talk about the Boondocks without Uncle Ruckus. No relation. So, okay, I don't know the consensus about Uncle Ruckus's character, but I am not a big fan. And it's not because he says the most outlandish and racist things probably on television, like just period. It's not because of that, although that does make me a little uncomfortable. It's way too much, and it's just that I feel like he's the type of character that only works in small doses. But as the series goes on, they just keep giving him more and more screen time. There are whole episodes, like in the latter half of season 3 and season 4, where half of the episode is focused on Uncle Ruckus. It just, his kind of character doesn't work with that. It's just the joke of ultra racism, crazy shit. And I'm sure there are people that do find his extreme absurdity funny. I mean, I found it funny occasionally within the earlier seasons, but it just got way too much and it just didn't stop. And it's just, they didn't do anything super crazy with his character. They did explore his backstory and explain the way why he is, which I really enjoy that episode. That's the one Uncle Ruckus focused episode that I extremely enjoyed, and I thought it was very justified. Just him being around. They also toned down his ultra racism just a little bit, just for sure, and that's just like every sentence he talks about, he's being the most, like bigoted person on the galaxy. But Still, overall, I'm not a big fan. He does have his funny moments, epic funny, wow. But just overall, I they just need to cool off on the Uncle Ruckus. I get it. He's a big staple, probably a fan favorite. If I were to guess, I'm not familiar with the Boondocks community, but it's just he's a bit much for me. He's a bit much. Of course, we have our very iconic not side character, but more like not cameos either. I guess like super small supportive cast characters. Of course, I'm talking about a pimp named Slickback. That's his full name. A pimp named Slipback. That's hard to say apparently for me. Um, he's a pimp. He's funny, goofy, pimping around as a pimp should, I guess. Um, very iconic to the community. That's something I do know about the community actually. And yeah, he has his funny moments as well. Very funny pimp escapades, I suppose. Um, and how could I refuse to mention Stink Meaner, which is an old guy Robert killed in season one and just kept coming back for like is like just whether it be beyond the grave or other means. He just won't stop coming around, and he's most infamous just in the general internet culture for the "what did you say" N-word moment. You know the one. Oh, what did you say? You know that is pretty big in internet meme culture, just internet culture in general. And I didn't know it originated from the show. And getting to see that moment unfold in its original context was very rewarding because I've always heard it and seen it, and of course thought it was very goofy and very silly. But it was just cool to see where it came from. Um, I have the same problem with Stink Meaner as I do with Uncle Ruckus. They just did a little too much with him. Hell, in the second to last episode of the whole series is another stink. It's a fourth Stink Meaner episode, and they like multiple times throughout the episode, our lead characters would be like, "Isn't this the same thing or very similar to last time?" And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's just a little different, but you're just treading the same thing again and again. I don't know if the writers thought they were being clever or funny. I didn't enjoy it. I just kind of felt like a long drag through the mud, and I don't know. It didn't really justify its existence by just pointing it out. Just because you point out your own flaws doesn't mean that it automatically gets fixed. That's not how it works. So that's unfortunate that that character's legacy is left out in a sour note in this adaptation. However, I can't deny Stink Meaner's influence in a lot of people's hearts. And the first two Stink Meaner episodes are great. The third one is, it's okay. It has probably some of the best action in the whole series, which really carries it. And then I just talked about the fourth being just bad, in my opinion. But, hey, what can I say? Very iconic guy. Another thing I really like that the Boondocks does is really developing its characters and world. Now, although no character really goes through substantial character growth and development for the most part, we do have characters that have kind of like little arcs where they kind of start something or like they plant the seeds of something in one episode and it gets expanded upon future later on. I think that's a great way to let your writers like build a cohesive and fun world while also not feel like you're forced to constantly create brand new ideas out of nothing, because inspiration is really hard to come by, and especially if you're working on a big scale production like animation, you always got to have something in the pipeline unless you end your production willingly or not. So it's not only a great idea for writers to come back to ideas and not all the time, I should say, like just reusing the same idea over and over again does not work, but having an idea and thinking, oh, we could definitely do something else really interesting with it and bringing it back later on is a very great way to do that. And I don't really expect that out of comedy shows, but when it does happen and we do have that semblance of this world keeps turning and going, it feels wonderful. The best example I can think of, surprisingly, oh my god, I feel I feel awful for even thinking this or wanting to say this, but I guess it's already on my mind and I'm already talking about it. So here we go. So Tom, the nice lawyer man, he has a big fear of going to jail and getting anally raped. And there's an episode about his fear. I think early on, season one, I believe. But then later, in one of the later seasons, they bring back that concept, and he's on a field trip with Huey and Riley and their class going to jail. And the inmates break loose, and he is fighting for his life. And I feel bad for enjoying or laughing, but it's just it's done in a really entertaining and ridiculous way. I should also say I do not find rape in real life awful. I never ever like to joke about it. Period. It's something that is very serious, and I understand, and I really feel bad for any victims relating to sexual assault. But I can't help but find it hilarious, just the way that Tom is and the way he reacts and just tries to defend himself. It was just fun, action packed, exciting, exhilarating. I was cheering him on throughout the entire thing, but also laughing at him throughout the entire thing. And I hope that doesn't make me seem like a really bad person, but I can't help it. It was done in a very crazy and absurd way. It's just the absurdity of these things that really get me. That I just can't help but be like, hee hee, haha. There are other examples of things that were mentioned or had even episodes dedicated on that got brought back later. Again, Stink Meaner, that's one. That one they did too much, but still, that's an example. I'm trying to think what other examples there are. I'm sure there is a few more. There's like some things in circulation, but I really enjoy it when it's done right, and when it's overdone. The only thing bad about that, though, is that since our main leads don't really develop substantially as characters, it kind of feels weird to see the world around them evolve pretty much and not themselves. Not completely. I mean, there's is a status quo that is always met for the most part, but despite that, I just feel like they should have let loose later on. Maybe it was what do you call it? Maybe it was restrictions from higher ups to be like, oh, you have to make it be able for everyone to follow it, which is a very very common higher up executive thing to do. I understand, the more accessible like episodes are to a general audience, the more potential revenue you can make, but that could really be detrimental to a show's life or legacy, or prevent it from being something beyond what it could be and be even more profitable. It is a risk and a gamble, and I don't deny that. But there are some cases where some shows or series or what have you should evolve to have continuity and take it more seriously. Not all the time, like Sesame Street. I don't know why the fuck Sesame Street's gonna get continuity in season 56 or 58 or whatever it's on right now. I don't know what the fuck kind of executive decision that is, but there were other ones that definitely should. And I personally enjoy when more like whimsical, silly, like I don't think episodic is the right word. What's just shows where you can comment at any time, whatever that's called. I enjoy when those kind of shows slowly evolve to become more like, serialized. Not all the time, they should, but when it's done right, it feels wonderful. And sadly, the Boondocks never became that. And I'm not saying it has to be. It just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, especially because one of the last episodes, we have a character. I'm just gonna say Siri, from Apple, on the iPhone, Siri. Basically, she became sentient, and she told Robert that he always ran away from his troubles and his problems, and that he should face them. And you know what? I'm kind of glad that the show really pointed out, hey, that is true. You should. It's like nudging the idea of maybe we can have this character grow. The only thing is that the show ends shortly after, and it's not like it planned to. It doesn't really feel like a finality because there's still quite a bit of loose threads. And I've heard that the show suffered quite the production struggle, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But it's a really unfortunate that it left off in a kind of awkward note. And overall, it's still a hearty watch. Again, if you can handle the absurdity of it all, and like really strong. Yeah. But it's just unfortunate that we got crumbs and more crumbs and crumbs later on of, oh, maybe these characters will finally start to expand and learn and grow and maybe become better people for it. But sadly, we never got that, and that's just unfortunate. I think it's a little bit of the fault of the writers and also the fault of executives as well. It's kind of a double edged sword. Both sides did a little bit faulty. Ultimately, the executives or whatever creative issue got in the way, or I should say, maybe more like financial development issue got in the way to cease production of the series. But either way, it's just unfortunate that we didn't get a Robert Freeman that was actively trying to be better, even if he regressed back to bullshit sometimes. That would have been interesting and had a lot of potential for stories instead of him just being a cranky, spanky, wanky old man. So, if I'm not mistaken, I believe one of the voice actors has mentioned that the show went through bad development issues and it got cut short. However, um, who worked on it? I think it was Sony Animated Pictures or some Sony studio. They're looking into wanting to revive and continue the Boondocks series, anime series way, um, which is an interesting thing to say because I imagine there would be NDAs involved. I don't know if just they were able to. They were just like, oh, fuck it. It's been too long. Maybe it expired. Either way, I don't know how exactly I feel about that. On one hand, I do want to see a more solid conclusion because it just kind of leaves off on a weird note, as I mentioned. But on the other hand, reboots or continuations don't always, hit the landing. Hell, I'd say if you're a reboot or continuation, there's a 90% chance that you're not gonna be what people want, whether it be general audiences or core fans or both. There's always gonna be some sort of complications. I'm sure there are continuations and or reboots or anything similar to that that has had a good reputation and that has done well overall. But honestly, I really can't think of one that hasn't pissed people off, just in a general sense, off the top of my head. Um, Maybe Ben 10? I'm not talking about the new one. I'm talking about how I think it had a second iteration. I'm not too familiar with Ben 10. I think that's like the only one I could conceive to think. Another one that came close was the Samurai Jack final season, but the ending really sucked and it really peeved people off. I'm not a huge fan of Samurai Jack. I'd watched a revival of it. I thought it was good until the ending, which sucked, and then they retroactively fixed in a video game, which is what the fuck? What do you mean? That's dumb. Either way, um, I am not clamoring for a Boondocks revival. Definitely not for a reboot. Um, Maybe farther down the line, I could accept a reboot. I just feel like maybe it's a little too soon, even now, even after many years removed, because I believe the final episode aired 2012, 2013. So we're roughly 10 or 11 years removed. However, it could work. It definitely could work. It's just been so long that I don't really know who to trust in terms of like development to make a good final Boondock season, or seasons if they wanted to do multiple. I will stay extremely cautious about it actually happening if it is revealed that it's gonna happen. And of course, I will watch it and definitely talk about it on here. But either way, I'm just, I don't know. I'm not crazy about the idea, but if I somehow ended up in the director role of the final season of the Boondocks, I would mostly focus on the comedy, have a little bit of world building, and tie up loose ends with whatever amount of time I could have. 10 episodes I can probably figure out, but I'm not a professional by any means whatsoever, so I'll never reach that point in my life. But that's kind of what I want. I just want more of the same and something a little new, a little old, tie up loose ends, have a satisfying ending as best as they can, and just make it great. I don't know if the manga is still ongoing or if it ended and it had an ending. I'm not sure. I have no idea. But whatever the case is, I'll keep my eyes and ears out for a potential revival mention in the future. And if anything of note comes up, I'll bring it up. But for now, that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed listening to my insane rambles about the Boondocks. I had a wonderful time watching through it. Even the times where it was tough, it was there's parts of it that were so good that I didn't mind the episodes that made me be like, oh, fuck, shit. But overall, I definitely recommend it again. It's good. And that's all I got for now. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.